Experimenter. I already knew the story. I mean, I didn't know the story behind the guy. I knew the story of the experiment. It's basically the experiment that's presented in this movie. It's the main one. It's about obedience, and it's about two people. They go into separate rooms. One is the teacher, and the other is the learner. And the learner has to learn a series of words, and he has to pair them up correctly. And if he gets them wrong, the teacher is there to administrate him an electric shock. So the experiment studies, will you electrocute someone just because someone else tells you to, someone in authority? And they have like a regular guy with a lab coat and just sitting down being like, this is the experiment, you have to shock him. And an astounding amount of people go through giving a shock that gets progressively higher and higher the voltage. And in reality, no one is getting shocked. It's just a fake experiment, I guess. The experiment is to actually find out, will people do that just because someone tells them to? The guy, I believe, was inspired by events during World War II. Nazis, there were a lot of Nazi soldiers saying, they killed a bunch of people because someone else told them to, and they didn't feel responsible for it, and they were just going through with the instructions they were given. So he wanted to investigate, will people actually do anything that they're told? Will they blindly follow orders even if they believe it's wrong? And the answer is yes, people will follow orders even if they believe what they're doing is wrong. So, it's a very interesting look into the experiment. This movie was, I was expecting this to be like an Oscar bait 7-hour movie, but it was actually an hour and a half, and it was really, really good. There were a couple of slower scenes that was just, okay, let's get on with it, but I really love the way it was shot. And the best part is Peter Skarsgård, he breaks the fourth wall, and he actually talks to the audience, and he brings the audience into the experiment, which is so cool. You're not just sitting outside of it, just watching random ass, boring ass psychology. It's you actually are brought into it, which is really, really cool, and you get to see how he interprets the results and how he decides to modify the experiment. I didn't know about this part, that he modified the experiment like various times. People still kept pushing the button. There were a couple of people that refused. Like almost all of them pushed the button, and there were a lot of statistics and percentages, and I don't remember all the percentages, but it was like 85% or something. People decided to go through, and they went through the end of the whole thing, and they gave the maximum punishment. So, I figured there was going to be more about the movie. There was going to be just about this particular experiment, and then his personal life. I was assuming something like he worked too much and his wife was mad at him, or he drank or something. Like the regular boring ass cliched biopics that we get every year. But this was actually, it was this experiment that was the main one, but then there were other experiments mentioned throughout the whole thing which were really interesting, sort of like smaller things here and there that he was working on. But the obedience experiment was the biggest thing that he was doing, and he worked on it. He didn't work on it for years and years. He worked on it for like a couple of years, but then he wrote a book, and then he was asked to speak about it, and then there were interviews, and then he was refused tenure at Harvard because this wasn't considered ethical, what he was doing. Which, what the fuck? Like, he just proved something incredible, I think, that people will blindly follow other people, and they will blindly follow instructions just because someone in the lab coat tells them what to do. And the other psychologists were like, no, you lied to people. You made them believe that they were harming someone. It's like, well, don't fucking harm anybody just because someone tells you to. Like, what the fuck? And in the beginning of the experiment, they're clearly told, we are paying you for coming to the lab. No matter what happens, the money will stay yours. At no point were they confined to this room. At no point were they confined to a chair or a button. He even modified the experiment so that the teacher would physically grab the listener's hand and put it on a pad that would shock him. They would physically have to do it. It wasn't just pushing the button, because I guess pushing a button is really easy, and people sort of get back and are like, no, I was told to do it, push the button, I didn't do anything wrong. But people would actually physically grab the listener's hand and put it on the pad and get electrocuted. So it was a really interesting look and again, someone does something innovative and everybody fucking hates him for it. So that was actually really frustrating. Usually I don't give a shit when that happens in movies, when people are overly critical of something new. But in this one, it really pissed me off. Like, he was doing something so interesting, and he was really analyzing human psychology. He was really mentioning the Nazis a lot and World War II, and he wanted to recreate the experiment in Berlin, and he consulted with tons of other psychologists, and everyone told him, like, of course no one will go to the end. And it was like, everybody went to the end, god damn it. So and it was very interesting to see, like, all these different actors coming in to do the experiment. Like, Michael Pena was in there, Steve Carell, and Anton Yelchin, and a bunch of people. Winona Ryder was really good. I really liked her in this. She played his wife, and she wasn't the typical wife that stays at home with the kid and is mad because her husband is always gone. She actually actively participated in the experiment and in his research, and she was really interested in everything he was doing. And so I really liked her character. She was actually interested in everything he was doing, and she wanted, you know, she was proud of her husband and what he was doing and his work. So I really liked her. And yeah, it was great acting, it was great writing, it was a lot more fun than I was expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be like some boring mess of just, no one understands me, no one understands the work that I do. But it was actually, he was a very interesting character. He was very methodical and everything, and it was very interesting experiments, like the one with a group of people are shown the same picture, and it's like one line and then 3 other different lines, and everyone has to say which 2 lines are the same. And everyone else, like, everybody's an actor, and there's one person that is the subject and he doesn't know it, and everyone says the wrong thing, and the subject will also follow everyone's wrong statement and say the wrong thing just because he doesn't want to be different. Even though he knows line A is the right answer, he was saying line B just because everyone else said that. So that was a really interesting experiment. I hadn't heard of that one. People follow other people no matter what. No one wants to stand out. Everybody says that they want to be unique and want to stand out, but when it comes to these types of things, everybody's fucking obedient. If someone in a lab coat tells you to do something, you do it. If someone in authority, it reminded me a lot of Compliance, actually. That's a perfect example that happened in real life. Where a guy pretended to be a cop and called, like, a fast food joint and was like, one of your employees stole something, you need to search her and strip search her and all those things. And people followed. They didn't even see the person on the other line of the phone. Like, he was just some crazy person pretending to be a cop, and they followed everything he said. So it was a really interesting look into human psychology, and I don't usually like those types of things. I studied psychology years ago at school, and it was an interesting subject sometimes. Other times it was just way too boring. I'm more of a science person myself. I'm not that into ethics and philosophy and all that. I'm more math and physics type of person. So I'm glad that it wasn't boring for me. I don't know if it's going to be interesting to other people, but I enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't Kellen Lutz made a fucking appearance. He played William Shatner, and it was bizarre, like, because his experiment was going to be turned into a movie, and it was fucking awful. I should research and see if that movie was actually made and watch it. It was called The 10th Level. If anybody out there knows if William Shatner was in a movie called The 10th Level, please, oh my god, I should watch that. So yeah, the Experimenter, it was actually really good. Very, again, self-contained story, and it was just this experiment that was the main one in his life, I guess. But he accomplished a lot of things. I think he got what he wanted out of it. Not in a good way, because he clearly didn't want to be right about people's nature, but I think he got what he wanted out of it. And he researched everything that he wanted to research, and I would call this experiment a success. It's a fail regarding human nature, but it's a success in showing what human nature is. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed it, and him breaking the fourth wall was very, very cool. Oh, and there was one really bizarre thing about this. They used a lot of green screen when they would drive around, or when they would go outside. They would, like, in front of, they went to see, like, an old friend of his, and they went to visit him and his wife, and everything was green screen. Like, it was clearly green screen. They sat in front of a fake, you know, house, and in front of a fake dining room and living room, but it was made to look like everything was fake around them, which was interesting. But, you know, I appreciate what they were trying to go for. Everything is fake around them, but it didn't look good. It didn't look right. It looked bizarre. They were just walking in front of a green screen, and it just looked silly a lot of the times. It looked really fake, but not in a good way. So yeah, there was just, like, one really bizarre thing in the movie, but other than that, I really enjoyed it. And yeah, that's it. Experimenter. Watch it. If you enjoy these types of experiments and things like that, like the, was it the Stanford experiment, where it was prisoners and guards in a university, and the guards had power over the prisoners, and they weren't supposed to abuse them physically or mentally, but they ended up doing that just because they had the power. So I like those types of movies about experiments like that. So yeah.
Rug, pillow, hair, grass. Incorrect. 165 volts, strong shock.
Let me out of here. I will not be part of the experiment anymore.
He says he's not going to go on. Please continue.
He says he doesn't want to go on.
We must continue.
In nearly every case, the essential results are the same. They hesitate, sigh, tremble, and groan, but they advance to the last switch, 450 volts, because they're politely told to.
I'm Stanley Milgram, and this is an experiment. The man in the other room wasn't being shocked.
Let me out of here.
Can you please go check that everything's okay?
Continue, please.
We wanted to get true reactions from people. The experiment's about obeying orders.
You could be dead in there.
Please continue.
Social relations. What does that mean?
Everything from the way people talk in elevators to the study of conformity, authority.
How does human beings participate in destructive, inhumane acts?
Why is defiance the anomaly instead of the norm?
Why didn't I stop? Because he told me to continue.
Let me out.
You tell yourself,
Well, I don't. I have a choice.
I wouldn't do that.
Have you done it?
I'd never do that.
That really hurt.
I don't like hurting anyone.
Let me out.
This part's where the experiment really begins.
Your father's turning into a fictional character.
Critics insist you're callous,
Unethical.
deceitful,
No one
repugnant.
was forced.
You're invested in the idea of authority, and you love lording it over all of us.
The person has a choice.
Son of a bitch.
He or she chooses obedience, awareness, liberation.
Life.
Oh, God.